So I'm Sydney Smith, S-Y-D-N-E-Y, S-M-I-T-H, and my role within the CBE is the Director of Area 5. And we want to take this opportunity to thank you for coming today. This gives us just one more way that we're able to communicate to our public about what we're doing right now and where we're at in the process around our reporting and assessment. So thank you for being here today. One of the things that we want to make sure of is that our families and our parents are able to participate fully in their children's learning. And one of the ways that they can do that is by being informed about the reporting and assessment processes. And we know that students' opportunities for success increase when their parents are informed and involved in their children's education. So why do we assess and report? So one of the things that parents really want to know when they come to school is, how is my child doing? How is my child progressing? What is it that they're able to do? What is it that they are having difficulty with? So how is it that I can help them move forward? So our report cards are one way that we can do that. It's a snapshot in time that gives us an opportunity to report to parents about where their children are at that particular time. Our report cards shouldn't be a surprise for parents. The ongoing communication that we do with parents and teachers and students over the course of the reporting period should then have that report card that comes home be something that is a confirmation of information that parents already knew. So the Calgary Board of Education's vision of assessment and reporting has evolved over a number of years. Report cards are one aspect of that. So one of the things that we've been working towards is to consolidate our reporting processes. So we're moving from about 26 different report cards to one consistent report card from kindergarten to grade 9. This allows us to align our practices, which helps families and helps students, particularly as they move from school to school, as they transition from a K-4 school to a middle school, or move communities. It allows for some continuity and some coherence around our practices. For a large majority of our schools, this is not a change. This new report card is not a change. It's not something new. There are some new pieces to it, but the framework of it is very consistent to what they have been doing. So I think that people understand that we have moved from 3 report cards going home to 2. And this isn't a conversation about more or less. It's a conversation about different. So rather than place as much emphasis on a report card, we want to structure it so that our conversation is an ongoing conversation with parents over the time. And that's the important piece, where parents are invited into where their children are at a particular time. It allows us to be much more responsive to where students are at and what their next right thing to do is as they move forward in their learning. So I think that our common report card is most supportive of student learning. This new way to look at the report card gives us much more specific information, richer information about what students are doing at school. It allows parents to understand what their children know and what they can do, and it gives much more clarity to what it is that we are reporting about. So I want to emphasize again that many schools have been using report cards that look very similar to this. What parents will see is a number of outcomes around each curriculum area or course. And these outline the major concepts and the skills that students are working on and learning about in each course. And students will be assessed against each outcome, not against the entire course. So I think we're used to seeing students come home with a mark in math. And rather than that, what you will see is students will be assessed against the outcomes that we are looking for in each of those subject areas. So this is the 4-point scale that we will be using to make those assessments. And these indicators alone don't make a lot of sense. They don't make a lot of sense. They need to be held up against something else. And that something else is the student's work in alignment with the program of studies. So when we look at an excellent, we want to be able to have evidence about what students are excellent at. So what particular part of that course or that outcome is it that students are excellent at? So our schools have been doing a great deal of work looking at these indicators so that they can interpret them for their particular context and around their students and their work. It's the evidence that teachers have to make the professional judgment of whether a student's working at a level 3 in a particular outcome or a level 4 that opens the conversation that students and parents and teachers can have together about where students' progress is at and what their achievement has been. And that's work we need to continue to do together so that it becomes an ongoing conversation with parents and teachers and students. The report card is just one piece of this. So I think we've mentioned before that it's that ongoing assessment and that ongoing work that students are doing in classrooms with their teachers and the communication of that ongoing work that's really important here. And that's what's going to give parents information about their students' progress. Another great way for parents to learn about student progress is from students themselves. And they are great ambassadors and great indicators of how well they are doing in the coursework that they're doing. There are many ways over the course of that reporting period that teachers communicate student progress with parents. That can be face-to-face, a parent-teacher-student conference. It can be online. It can be by email. It can be through some of the structures we have like D2L or Home Logic that allow us to provide those kinds of updates and ongoing communication for parents. We've had many questions about why is this just K-9? And our work is with our schools from K-12 around assessment and reporting. And the way we report at the high school will remain with a percentage because that's dictated to us by our post-secondary institutions. They're looking for a percentage grade in order to be able to do their entrance processes. And so it's not that assessment isn't changing as well at high school, it's how we report it that needs to stay the same. Many of our parents wonder whether or not the transition from middle school to high school is going to be impacted by this new report card. And the answer to that is no. Our schools, our middle schools, and our high school personnel are working very closely together with families to ensure that that students have a smooth transition from a middle school into the high school. And that's being done in very intentional ways throughout the system. And these conversations will assist our high school personnel in knowing the learners as they make that transition from middle school to high school. The steps that we've taken over the past number of years have been very deliberate. And they have been based on a number of different sources as we've moved forward. And there's some examples of those here on the screen. We consider these sources, we make a decision, we listen, we adapt, and we continue to move forward. And this is the process that we intend to continue to use in the future so that this is an ongoing conversation with parents and with students. We've worked with our communities in a number of ways. Probably the most evident way for parents is the work that individual schools have done around informing, collaborating, and being able to share information with parents. But we've also done a number of other things so that we're trying to make sure that parents understand how it is and why it is that we're doing what we're doing. We will also have feedback loops so that principals can keep the system up to date about the feedback that they're hearing, so that that will inform decisions in the future. When we collaborate with parents, it's important that we close a loop and that parents understand that they have been listened to and that their voice has influenced decisions that have been made. And so these are just some of the ways in which parent voice has influenced decisions. We also know that it doesn't matter what the decision is that needs to be made. We're going to have parents on both ends of a spectrum. And so they will have competing values about what they think is important. And it's important for us to listen to all of the voices and then make an informed decision that's going to serve students across the system. This is a point in time of the conversation that we're having. And it's a time that we want to continue the conversation with parents, and we want parents to continue to provide feedback for us as we move forward. And so there are a number of ways that can happen. But the best place for parents to interact around this topic is at their local school, as close to their students as possible. So conversations with teachers, with principals, is a great way for people to continue to have input. There's also an additional opportunity for people on the website. That'll be available later today for people to be able to give their feedback. So this just kind of takes us back to where we started, that this is just one more way that we're trying to get our message across to our parent community and to the community of Calgary about the work that we're doing around assessment and reporting. And there's a place that you can go and look for additional information, and we're happy to answer any of the questions that you might have here for us today. Schools, there was a percentage that was an indicator.
Those letter grades, correct me if I'm wrong, they would always be tied to a percentage, though. Wouldn't they, like an A- would be no? No,
and so Pat might be able to talk a little bit about how they used it at Nichols School, but it was similar to the kind of indicator scale that you would see here. There was a description around what an A meant, not that an A was 80 to 100%.
One more question for you. By and large, are other school systems in the province, in the country, I don't know where else you compare it, Finland or something, are they shifting away from this too? And why is that shifting away from, I guess, kind of the numerical grade that I used to be scared of when I was in junior high? Are by and large, are school boards shifting away from that?
Yes, I would say that this is a shift that's happening across the province and in different parts of the country and in different countries. And Jeremy, it's because this gives richer and more accurate information to parents about what their individual child is able to do and what they know. So rather than getting an 80% in language arts, which I could argue, what does that really tell me about what my child is able to do in that particular subject area? These outcomes will break down children's ability in reading, comprehension, in writing, in different areas, so that I get a much more personalized perspective of my child and what they're able to do.
Does it factor in with the new grades, or the 4 grades, so to speak? Does that factor in, say, attendance, attitudes, those kinds of indicators as well?
No. So these indicators are about children's progress against the program of studies. Because Whether the child is on time or not, whether the child completes their homework as neatly as we'd like them to do or not, doesn't tell me what they know. And so it's much more important that we report what kids are able to do and what they know. We have other ways that we measure personal development, citizenship, and character through our results reporting. So we will comment on those things, but that won't form part of these indicators.
How do students get held back, or some people say held back, some people say fail a grade? Does that still happen, and how does that happen? You know, in some schools, it maybe previously was, if you, I think if I recall my days in school, it's going back a little ways, you know, 50% below, there was the opportunity to move on if like your parents were okay with it or something, but 50 and below is kind of, you're in now in the radar where you could be held back. How do you determine whether a student doesn't progress, say, from grade 7 to 8?
So retention is not something that we do a great deal of in the Calgary Board of Education. And so that would be a conversation that a school would have with a parent around an individual child, and we would look at all of the factors that were impacting that child and what the benefit would be for a child to do that. And there would have to be some pretty significant benefits that we would see before we would go down that route.
Cindy, can you just kind of break down, you showed us the factors themselves, could you just kind of sum up why those specific ones were the ones that you came out with?
I'm not sure if you mean the end of the 4-point indicator scale?
Yes, exactly.
So we've had a number of iterations of that 4-point indicator scale, and what parents told us was they didn't want any jargon. They wanted to really be able to understand what it was that we were reporting about their child's progress. And so what we've tried to do, and we'll get more feedback on this, I'm sure, but what we've tried to do is we've tried to be really concise about, on each of these outcomes, does a child have a basic understanding of what we would expect for a child at that particular age and stage? Or do they have a really significantly stronger, excellent understanding? Are they able to? And so it will be about the evidence that the teachers are able to gather to be able to hold that up and to measure. So many of our teachers are creating a rubric or an exemplar or that sort of thing so that you could see what, in a writing assignment, what a 4 might look like. So a child could then take their work along with their parent and look at that against that exemplar and be able to say, in order for me to be at that level, here are the things the next steps that I would need to do.
So one of the terms, I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but one of the terms that people scoffed at originally with these report cards was the term emerging. People said that told me nothing. So you're saying now that it is standardized to those 4?
That's correct.
And those are far more, what's the word, easy for people to accept. They're less ambiguous maybe?
Well, I think they probably take less thinking about or rationalizing or defining. That's probably the best word. They take less defining. But on their own, they don't tell us a whole lot. So we have to be able to take those and hold them up against students' work and the program of studies to be able to really understand what that means.
So my name is Sylvie Monfette. I will spell that for you. Sylvie. Monfette, M-O-N as in Norman, F-E-T-T-E. And I'm the principal of Dr. E.P. Scarlett.
My question is just, do you worry at all about kids coming from grade 9 or through 9 years of school where they haven't had these percentage grades and then having to move into high school, where those percentage grades, whether we like it or not, do serve as kind of a benchmark for whether a student gets into the University of Calgary? The University of Calgary touts that in engineering, for example, I think you need 86% this fall to be considered for their engineering program. You know, whether we like it or not, they use those numbers as kind of their guideline. Do you worry at all about kids going from that to then being thrust into the world of percentage grades and trying to make sure you have that 85% average?
So first of all, this 4-point scale to us, and when I say us, I mean high school principals, we did not even bat an eye when we heard about that because we already have students coming with various systems. So for example, I was the recipient of the students from Nickel who were at letter grades. We had students coming with percentages, other coming with ranges of marks, students coming from outside Alberta that were coming with different systems. So it's not new to us to have to figure out what does a 4, what does an A, what does a C, what does a 75 means. So this is not new to us. And then when they come to high school, we're interested much more about what kind of learners they are than a mark. So I'll give you an example. So when we still had the percentages, at my high school, we have a large advanced placement program, for instance, and we were interested in the mark as one of the indicators of the type of students we were looking at. So we were also looking at what kind of students are they in terms of work habits, passion for the subject, aspirations as a career. All these came into play. We were already looking for much more than a mark, than a percentage mark. So in our work with middle schools, in our transition work, that's what we're interested in. Who are these students and what kind of learners are they? That's far more helpful for us in helping them select the courses that they want to take in high school. Now, to answer the second part of your question, once they come to high school, so we have we've done a lot of work in high school to figure out what does a percentage mark means. Teachers develop rubrics. We explain clearly to students what the outcomes that they are studying are, so that they know exactly if they're reaching those outcomes, and that translates then into a percentage, and that percentage mark is a reflection of their learning. That mark is then used for entrance at the post-secondary level.
Do you find this now that it's standardized, will allow everybody to sort of work together more closely in a sense, because now you're going to get that the teachers in the junior high speaking more with the teachers from high school?
Absolutely. So this is a great opportunity for us to use the same language. As I mentioned before, we used to deal with letters, percentages, ranges, and we had to find out what they all meant. Now we're all going to have the same language, and we'll be able to talk about what the work that we're doing this year with the middle schools will be. So what are you calling a 4? What are you calling a 3? So that we have a better sense of what it means. For us, it will be advantageous that we go to the same system.
Just out of curiosity, in high school, you still get only 2 report cards a year?
Yes, currently, yes.
And so does that help you guys as well in the sense of it creates that everybody's doing the same thing?
Yes, I hadn't thought about it that way, but absolutely. It's against consistencies of expectations for parents, and also expectations that the report card is one way to communicate progress. There are still the face-to-face conversations, the home logic, the D2L, all these online platforms to help parents get more and students to get more information about their achievement.
It didn't start out that way. So this was a direction that we were moving before the conversation came up about the weight of diploma exams.
Do you think it? I don't want to put you on the spot as an educator, but do you think? I mean, largely, do you hear from teachers at the high school level that they are in favor of maybe reducing the weight of that test?
So, as I stated before, anytime there's a conversation about something like this, we hear from people on both sides of the spectrum, and we hear that from parents, we hear that from students, and we hear that from our staff. And I think we need to let this conversation unfold and participate in it so that we can hear from all of those different voices to determine how it is that we'll move forward.
letter grades before.
That's right.
Does this change much at all for you guys, other than it goes from an A to exceptional?
No, I don't think it does change a whole lot. Our letter grades were not in relation to a percentage in any way, shape, or form. Our letter grades were against rubric statements in the same way that the new indicators are on the new report card. So I would say for parents at Nichols School, they won't see a large shift with the new report card going out. It should be very, very similar to what they've seen in the past.
Go ahead, Joe.
And this will be what they see either at the end of this month or into January?
Yeah, ours go home the end of January, yeah.
I was just going to ask Pat, so they kind of talked about being on the same kind of spectrum with all the schools with kind of a standardized base for the high school system. For you guys, can you talk to that a little bit as well, how this kind of a more standard system that all the schools can kind of be with can also create a little bit more sense of cohesion perhaps?
Well, I think where we see it in our school is when students move from one middle school to another middle school within CBE. There's a bit of a discontinuity when students come from a school that used percentages to a school that does letter grades like we did. Other schools were using indicators even last year. So I think that creates a bit of discontinuity. So I think the new system will make it easier for parents to fluidly move around our system. And as this kind of a movement takes hold around Alberta, it'll make it easier for families to move. And we do have a number of families who, in my school, we have new communities, Cranston and Auburn Bay, where a number of new families move in every year from across Canada. So I think it does provide increased continuity, at least within Calgary, and as we start to move out around Alberta, it'll have the same effect.
So my question, the number of report cards we get, in some cases it'll go from 3 to 2. I know when I was a kid it was 4, we got 4. Is 2 enough in your eyes, given how sometimes parents are a little information crazy and want to know almost on a daily basis what the grades are?
So in my school, parents do know on a daily basis because we have, I don't want to say grades, but we have indicators against outcomes that are put up every day on the internet. Sydney showed one slide that mentioned a home logic. So teachers use what they call teacher logic. When they mark assignments, when they assess, they put in indicators into the computer, and that appears live for parents. So we're doing way more communicating than we ever did when we had 3 or 4 report cards, because student marks are essentially live starting in October for the rest of the year. And parents who actively go in and use that system love it because they can see immediately how their student is doing at any point in time. They don't have to wait for report cards, or they don't have to call and create an appointment with a teacher and come in to find out. So we're actually doing way more communication than we did before. But it's different communication. Instead of it being summative now, where we're always making judgments about where a student was at any given time in its entirety, now we're giving indicators against outcomes as students improve. So we don't roll up our marks anymore. At the end of the year, we look at each individual student, we say this student is sitting here against all of these outcomes, and that's the indicator that they would get at the end of the year. So it's not an averaging. And it's much more realistic in terms of what students have really achieved. And I think then it's better for the high school because we often have students who don't do well in the first few months of the year, but they really pick it up, say, in the last 4 or 5 months. Well, now that progress is valued at the end of the year, and where they're sitting is accurately reflected in their final mark versus it being an average of a whole bunch of low marks moving up to higher ones.